worrying about something, you put it on the stove, and then you leave it for a few minutes, and then you forget about it, and then you smell it eventually. Worrying distracts you. Worrying also divides you. When I say divide you, meaning internally. Internally, it will divide you. The number one prescriptions of medicine is prescribed for anxiety or worry. The number one cause of health issues is worry and stress. It divides your inner self. Number two, why do we typically worry about? So we look at these verses here. Jesus is talking to a first century audience. We are in the 21st century, but he is talking to a first century audience. What were they worrying about back then? Two things: food and clothing. When they would get up in the morning, they're already thinking, what am I going to eat? Where am I going to get that? That is what they were thinking about. And Jesus says, life is more than food and the body more than clothes. Clothing, what will they wear? Basically, they were what was on their back. That's what they had to wear. And they were thinking about, well, cold weather's moving in. Where am I going to get something to keep my body sheltered, keep my body warm? So he's speaking to a first century. When they would get up thinking about food, they didn't have a pantry stocked with food. They didn't have a refrigerator stocked with food. They were thinking, where will I get my next meal? And then he relates that to the raven about food. Consider the raven. They do not sow or reap. They have no storage rooms or barns, yet God feeds them. Have you ever seen a bird on a wire up above that looks like it has an anxiety? It's got its feet up to its beak. Oh, what am I going to eat? I don't know what I'm going to eat. You don't see that because they know that God will take care of them. There's a conversation I came across where a robin says to a raven, I would surely like to know why these anxious human beings rushing about and worried, why are they rushing about and they're worried? Said the raven to the robin, friend, I think that it must be that they have no heavenly Father such as us that cares for them. They know their heavenly Father will take care of them. And then he says, how much more valuable you are than birds. He says that. How valuable are each one of you? The scriptures tells us in Romans 8:32. Romans 8:32 says, he who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, freely give us all things? How valuable are you? He chose his son. He gave up his son for you and I. That's how valuable you are. And he will give us all things. We are valuable to him. But in the human world, we have somehow got that twisted a little bit. We have passed laws, and I can understand to a certain degree of what we as humans have done to the animal wildlife. There used to be 20 million buffalo, and they got it down to probably 100. I saw a video the other day of coyotes in Yosemite, and it got down to 44. But now they've started to build it up. I can understand the laws that we have passed, but also I don't understand some of the things that have been passed that are like, for instance, out in California, this little fish, this little smelt fish that they didn't want to save they run the water out to the ocean instead of filling up the reservoir because of this little fish, and then they didn't have water for their fire. And also, as I said, we have twisted it where we think more of the animals than we do of humans. And when I say that, we are uncaring about the unborn baby. We have twisted it around. We do not care about the unborn baby. So he was talking to a first century audience. So how can we relate that to a 21st century audience? We worry, what are we going to eat? When we say that, what are we going to eat? What are we thinking? Do you want Mexican? Do you want Chinese? Do you want Greek? Do you want Italian? That is what we are saying. Totally different than what the first century. That's what. We're standing in front of the pantry. What do I want? What do I want to eat? That's what we're thinking. And when we say, what are we going to wear? We're standing in the closet, which is a walk-in closet, and all the shoes, boxes that are high above us, what are we going to, and we're thinking, what did I wear last Sabbath? Not, honey, what did I wear last Sabbath? That is what it's totally different than the. Still not working? Oh, it's working, okay. So what are some of the things that a 21st century individuals worry about? Does this come up? One of them is the future. Okay? One of them is the past. One of them is money, health, job security, relationships, and what others think. The future. You worried about the future? Are you worried about what the unknown is? God says, don't be anxious, and I'm going to put this in, the future. Don't be anxious about the future. Let's look over at Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 29. Verse 11. Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you the hope and a future. He has a plan for you. In a couple weeks, I preached on Jericho, and they were going to invade Jericho. And there was only two ways at that time to invade a walled city. One is to rush it, and one is to starve it out. And Joshua spoke to God. God told him the plan. Joshua went to the generals and said, here's the plan. And they said, are we going to rush it or starve them out? And he said, no, we're just going to walk around it. So God's plan is not your plan. God may have a different plan for you than what you have for yourself. Don't worry about the future. God has a plan for you. And let's look at the past. And the past is what we can't change. We can't change the past. The past has already gone by us. But let's get 43. Isaiah 43, verse 18 and 19. It says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up, do not perceive it. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland." He's saying, forget the former things. I've got something new for you. Concentrate on what I have new for you. Don't look at the past. We don't have a do-over button. Once it's done, you can't go back. And I like what Sister Damaris said. Once it comes out, it's hard to put it back. So do it right the first time. Thank you. That was good. So you look at this list, can you spot one or two that you're thinking about? Or are you worried about all seven? Is there one or two up there? Three? Are you worried about money? Are you worried about job security? Are you worried about your health? As I said, I can relate to this. Do not be anxious. And I talked about my health. But I turned to the prayer warriors in this church. I made some calls and said, I got to go get a new kidney. Get the prayer warriors on it. I was concerned about my heart, but I was worried about my kidney. I don't know why I had those two different feelings which came within me, but that's what it came within me. That I was more concerned about my kidney. And when we worry, it affects us psychologically and physically. Some people, they eat more, and some people eat less. Some people have a nervous stomach. And I can relate to this as individuals. I'll tell individuals that worked at Whirlpool for 34 years. But that first week, it was tough. I'd get up, I'd throw up, I'd go to work. For the first week, I'd get up, throw up, and go to work. I was working as an electrician before this job, and everything was laid back, worked at your pace. I went to Whirlpool, that line didn't stop. You suck it up and get those screws in it, or they'll be coming down saying, why didn't you get this done? I get up, throw up, and go to work. And then when I worked as a manager at that chemical plant, and I shared this with you, it wasn't if something would go, if how did I say it? It's not if will go wrong. No, something will go wrong every day. I was dealing with elevators, pumps, belts. Something would break down. And my go-to to relieve my stress was a can of Diet Mountain Dew. Just to hear it, just to hear that. It was just the first sip. After that, I didn't like it, but that first sip, it was just your pump's down. You got four 18-wheeler trucks out front. They want to be filled up. The boss is looking at you. The employees are looking at you. What are you going to do? I had nobody to look to in that physical situation. Charles Mayo, which is the co-founder of the Mayo Clinic. Oh, I wanted to say this first. And individuals that eat. I didn't eat when I was stressed, but there's individuals that eat. You always hear the funny. They get the half-gallon ice cream out, or they start eating half of a cake. Well, if we had do we have that? If you put stressed and you spell it backwards, it spells dessert. That's why you reach for a gallon of ice cream. Some people eat, some people don't. Stress, spelled backwards, is dessert. Charles Mayo, co-founder of the Mayo Clinic, he says that worry affects the circulation of your heart, your glands, and the whole nervous system. That's why you have heart attacks, stress, you have strokes. It affects your body. There's a quote by Corin ten Boom: worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow, it empties today of its strength. Worry does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. You'll still be sorrowful, but it empties today of its strength. It'll empty you of your strength. So our third question is, how can we fight against the sin of worry? Let's look over at 2 Corinthians 10. 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3